Hey, what's up guys? It's Wednesday night and you know what that means. We have the leaks for the brand new chapter of Black Clover, chapter 336. And as always, we're getting these leaks from the Black Clover subreddit, which I don't know why I'm going to even bother saying this because I always end up forgetting to do it, but I'm going to try to remember to put a link for them in the description box down below. Anyway, let's jump right into the summary, which as always, we're going to go over the summary first and then talk about it afterwards. Okay, so the chapter is going to be 17 pages, there's no break next week, and as of right now, we don't have a chapter title. The chapter starts with Yuno meeting up with the captains. Everyone is really sad. Yami has a pissed off, angry expression. Also, he has smoked like a dozen cigarettes. Naca shows up with a brand new look. I'm actually really interested in seeing that when the chapter drops. He explains his magic allows him to move between the shadows of anything, but he can't sense Asta's shadows, implying he's either too far to reach or dead. Interesting note, Naca was shown to be able to move from the Speed Kingdom to the Clover Kingdom via that same magic, so Asta has to be at least further away from them than the Speed Kingdom is. Yuno explains that during their fight with Lucifero, there was another Supreme Devil, Adramelic, who was observing everything. It seems he also had a horde of high-ranking devils working under him. That's why only low and mid-rank devils were shown during the Spade Raid finale. Lucifero was apparently just a diversion, and Adramelic was a runaway. It seems the high-ranking devils were sent by Lucius too. The horde of high-ranked devils can somehow link the underworld to the mortal world, which explains how Lucius can move from the underworld to the mortal world. We get a little flashback from Yuno's point of view, and it shows how he always thought that Asta was the one ahead of him. The scene shifts to Lucius sitting in a throne somewhere. 4 people can be seen standing next to him. Damnatio is a paladin now, and Adramelic has come to talk to Lucius. He is surprised that Yuno got that strong in just 1 year and 3 months. He can now take on high-ranking devils. Lucius says that they're in the endgame now. Only 1 out of tens of thousands of timelines he foresaw will end in the good guy's favor. Lucius says that the key to their victory is going to be the one who carries 2 grimoires, a special existence heir to the Spade Throne, the one who hosts the spirit of the Elven leader and the gifted chosen by Sylph, Yuno. Lucius says that for the sake of this world, he'll crush Yuno. Yuno says he'll defeat Lucius and become the Wizard King. Scene shifts to a heavily injured Asta on a beach. A new person appears, either dwarves or Yami's homeland. And then the leaker goes in to give more information about exactly how Lucius' future sight actually works. And basically what they say is that Lucius can see tens of thousands of timelines, and he just kind of assumes that the most probable one is the absolute future, but he's not exactly certain. That's why during the last arc he had Adramelic sitting on the sidelines, in case what he predicts ended up not being true or there's any wrinkles in it, so that Adramelic can be there as a plan B. Which, before we get into the whole rest of the summary, I do want to talk about this part right here, because assuming that the leaker is actually right about how the future sight works, then this chapter is kind of disproving the entirety of the clock theory, because assuming I'm understanding it right, the whole point of the clock theory was that Lucius was watching over the fight against Lucifero the entire time, and he was basically just reversing time over and over again when the good guys lost, until he got the desired outcome he wanted, which was Lucifero being defeated. But if he was doing that, then he wouldn't need Adramelic there as a plan B. I mean, sure, he could still be there to collect the heart for him, but he wouldn't need him to be there in case his prediction was actually wrong. He would just have him there to collect the heart. So I guess by this definition of how his future sight works, that does mean that the whole clock theory was actually just not a thing that the Bible's doing. Which I think is going to be interesting to see how the fans react to this, because I know a lot of fans got reinvested in the Spade arc and the entirety of Black Clover in general because of that whole clock theory. So I'm interested in seeing exactly how the fans will react to this being disproven. Anyway, getting back to the rest of the chapter, I'm actually happy to find out that we're seeing Yuno in the very beginning of the chapter apparently, because one of the things I'm sure we all were looking forward to the most after the ending of the last one was how exactly he would end up reacting to find out that both Sister Lily was turned into a paladin, and she was the one who, as far as they're aware, killed Asta. Because we know that since he has a connection, very close connection to both of them, he's going to have a very visceral reaction to finding out this information. And I'm really disappointed that in this entire summary, we don't get any hints to exactly how he ends up reacting to it. Now, I mean, that being said, I'm sure that once we actually get the chapter, we're going to get to see a very visual reaction from Yuno to finding out this information. I mean, hell, we saw how very upset he was about half his squad dying off in the last arc. And considering the fact that he actually has a much more stronger connection with both Yuno and Sister Lily, he's definitely going to react a lot harder to this. And you know what, speaking of reactions, I'm glad we're getting to see more of Yami's reaction to all of this in this chapter, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing exactly how he develops over the next saga, because this is the second time he's being betrayed by someone he actually revered as a close friend. And on top of that, it was his own mentors doing it this time. And I mean, to make things even worse, at this point, Yami definitely considers the entirety of the Black Bulls to be his family, and Asta's definitely like his student slash protege. And the fact that his mentor was the one who killed his student, Yami's definitely going to be out for revenge at this point. Now, I'm happy that Naca showing up in this chapter for 2 reasons. One, we get a brand new redesign for him, which we really haven't gotten many redesigns for the time skips so far. I mean, in the first one, we got, what, like a handful of characters who had redesigns, not that many altogether though. And in this one, we've only seen Asta so far actually have a redesign for his look. Everyone else has kind of looked the same since they did from the last time skip. So the fact that he's actually getting a brand new look is actually very exciting, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing what's about to design for him. And on top of that, I like the idea of him showing up and using his shadow magic to try to find Asta, because this kind of confirms that Asta's nowhere on the continent now. Because we've seen that at the very least he can travel from the Space Kingdom to the Clover Kingdom, which means I would assume that pretty much anywhere on the continent itself, if Asta was there, he could sense his shadow. And now, as you guys already know, my personal guess is that Asta was sent to Purgatory based on the wording that the body used when referring to Lucius' soul magic. But there are some other options, like for example, he could have been sent to the Dwarf Kingdom, which, based on the silhouette that we see at the end of the chapter from the leaked images on the person that finds Asta on the beach, normally I would say no to that idea, but considering the fact that Charmy's dwarf form is her growing taller than she actually is, I can assume that at this point the dwarves in this universe are just like normal sized people who just have like some kind of special property to their magic. So it's not exactly unbelievable that Asta might have been sent there, and if he was sent there, then he might actually end up getting a brand new sword from it. I also like the idea of Asta being sent to Yami's home country because, well, it's obvious that Yami's going to have a huge role during the saga, so us finding out more information about his backstory in his home country would actually be kind of interesting and possibly fit well with the entire plot that he goes through in this arc. Which also, on top of that, we also might end up finding out that Asta could meet the person that actually taught Yami how to use the sword back in his home country, which would mean that Asta will get a brand new sword master and learn some brand new techniques that actually might give him the advantage when going back to fight against Lucius again. Now, I think the most interesting thing we end up finding out in this chapter is that Adramelic is actually still alive, because over this last week, ever since we got the last chapter and found out about the paladins and all that, I've been kind of scratching my head and going back and forth for whether or not I think Adramelic was actually dead or alive, because we saw him at the end of the last arc working with Lucius, so I thought, alright, maybe he might still be alive. But then Lucius said that he converted all the Supreme Devils into, he purified them. He purified them and was planning on making them into his paladins by giving their magic to other people. So I thought Adramelic might be included in that list. But I guess in this chapter we're confirming that he's actually still alive. Which means that we all might be wrong about this entire list of, the number of paladins that Lucius is going to have. Instead of 12, he might only actually end up having 11. And Adramelic might end up taking that 12th spot. I mean, that being said, there is still the possibility that he might end up getting 12 paladins outside Adramelic, because we don't know exactly how many Supreme Devils there were in Underworld. But what we do know is that he already has at least 6 paladins, because we saw him turn Sister Lily into one. We find out that in this chapter he has 4 near him in the throne room, and we also find out in this chapter that Damnatio is also apparently a paladin as well. Which, I'm surprised none of us saw that coming, because the evidence was literally right there in our face. Because the last time we saw Damnatio, we saw Lucius putting his fingers on his forehead, which is the same thing he did to Sister Lily when he turned her into a paladin, so we kind of should have connected the dots there. Now, I mentioned in my last review that I'm hoping that both Nebra and Solid end up becoming paladins, but as of right now, I'm going to kind of write them off from being any of those 4 characters that we see in this chapter, just because I feel like that if either one of those 2 or both of them were paladins at this point, that both Nozel and Noel would have mentioned them missing at some point. I mean, especially Nozel being their captain, would have known that they were definitely missing. In fact, I'm actually going to add on, I don't think any of the characters who are connected to any of the Magic Knight squads are going to end up being any of the paladins that we see in this chapter, just because, again, I feel like their captains would have mentioned or, noticed them being missing. And I plan on making a whole video later on about who I hope ends up becoming a paladin during the saga, but as of right now, when it comes to these 4 characters, there's one character that I'm really hoping ends up being one of them, because this character will not only be brought back into relevancy by showing up as a paladin, but also bring other characters back into being relevant during the story. And that is that I'm hoping that one of these paladins ends up being Fanzel. Because I mean, for one, I really like Fanzel as a character, but on top of that, he was the first teacher that Asta had, so there's a connection there. And him showing back up could bring Mars back into the story, a character that we've all been hoping would show up at some point. And considering the fact that the Diamond Kingdom was destroyed and we never heard anything more from him after that, maybe this might be the time for Tabata to bring Mars back into the relevancy, and also on top of him, Fauna and all the other characters that are connected to them. Now when it comes to who the other 3 characters are, I'm going to save that for my video going over who I want to become paladins. I think the only other information we end up finding out in this summary that's actually kind of interesting is that Yuno is now strong enough to take down a high-ranking devil by himself, which really isn't that surprising. I mean, considering Yuno's normal level of growth, a year and 3 months after the fight against Luciferal, it would make sense that he actually got that strong at this point. I mean, he was already kind of almost there at the end of the last arc, so yeah, he should definitely be there at this point in time. So yeah, that's not really all that surprising. Finding out that Lucius is in charge of all the high-ranking devils, again, not that surprising at all, because I mean, he kind of already said that like a chapter or 2 ago. So again, that's not really all that surprising, and plus, whether he's in charge of them or not, he's just going to end up purifying them anyway and turning them into the souls that he puts in humans in order to turn them into true humans, so Again, it's not really that relevant to the story or really that important. But what is surprising is finding out that Lucius thinks that in the only timeline where the good guys win is when Yuno takes him out, so he plans on taking out Yuno as well. Which makes me wonder, if that's the only timeline that he saw that they end up winning in, why would he go after Asta first and not go after Yuno first? You would think that Yuno would be his main target if that was the only timeline where the good guys win. Because Asta, as we already saw, he could have easily taken out at any point. But if Yuno's the actual threat to your plans, why not go after him first? Although, that being said, since Lucius didn't go after Yuno, that means we can now set up the fight between the two of them. Which means, I guess, Yami won't be the one to kind of like prime Lucius up for Asta. He's basically going to be sidelined to fight someone else, while Yuno takes him on, and then after Yuno either defeats his first form or gets defeated by Lucius, that's when Asta's going to show up and either they're going to tag team him, maybe Yami might get involved at that point as well, or it's basically just going to be they get defeated and then Asta shows up and beats the one to take him on 1v1 and defeats him at that point. Anyway guys, that's going to do it for me for this video. Thanks for watching. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please drop me a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to reach my first major goal of 1,000 subscribers, and I'd really appreciate your help getting there. Anyway, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.